Hi, everybody. This is Mary from Always Learning, and have something I think is really interesting to talk about. You have probably experienced the feeling of thinking, well, people used to be a lot nicer. Well, I've questioned that. I've questioned that a lot. Somebody the other day asked me, did people really like each other more back in those days, or did you just have to deal with each other more? And I thought, that is actually really quite a good question because were people really nicer, as a lot of us Gen Xers say, or did we just have no choice we had to interact with them more, which means we had to get used to it. I don't know. Let's talk about it. I'll give you some of the ideas that I have. One of them is no ghosting. You know how people ghost each other these days? They just disappear if their connections are highly online or digitally in any way. You're going to see a lot of people that just cut off relationships, just disappear. That's called ghosting. Now, back then, if you didn't want to talk to a person, it's somebody in your class at school or friends or somebody that went to the same 3 grocery stores in the same town or whatever and hung out in the same places, the one McDonald's we had, it was hard to ignore everybody that you maybe didn't want to be around. You had to dodge them and not take their calls. Somebody would always have to call your parents and say, hey, can I speak to, and whatever. And you'd have to tell your parents, no, it's a big ordeal. And you also hoped that the person you were trying to not be around, we always had that hope that maybe they would not show up at our house, because back in those days, people actually did share themselves with us by walking into your house with no invitation sometimes, neighbors, family members, and so on. And people would just show up. See, these days, I like to have a day's notice, but I require you at least give me a reasonably long time and call me if you want. I'd prefer text now. I feel like I'm just as bad as everybody else, but no, I don't want people to just show up back then like they did back then, rather. I'm sorry. But nowadays you just can leave someone just on read in your text messages, for example. Back then, though, you had to face the consequences of what you've done, which is avoiding the person. And who knows how that would turn out. There's a lot of confrontational things that could come of that. Now, I'd also like you to think about forced socialization. Forced socialization, when you wanted to hang out, you actually had to go over there somewhere, right? You couldn't just text somebody and hope that maybe you could make plans just on a spur of the moment. Not that spur of the moment plans didn't happen, but this was basically where you left your house, you got on your bike, you went over to find where your friends are, your friend group. And a lot of times it really was where all the bikes were, in the front yard. Now, the thing is, you have to deal with the in-person interactions so regularly that it becomes just second nature. And I think a lot of people my age realize that it is going to be our second nature because we grew up like this and we learned those social skills, because what else could you do? You had to go into the bank at some point and cash a check or deposit something. I remember the first ATM I used. You couldn't, in terms of the, say, socialization aspect, you had to have some of those skills, and if you didn't, you kind of learned them. You couldn't just email somebody in your office if you're a grown-up and just send them a message and not worry about that, and you walked over to his desk back in those old days and deal with whatever was going on with John or Joey or whoever it was at that time. You had to engage with people, is the point. Whether you like them or not, you had to engage with them. You had to figure out a way to do it that was comfortable enough that you could fake it till you make it, or so, whatever. Now, also, we had no, I guess the best way to say it is we had no algorithm for each other, right? Today, when you go on social media, if you go on social media at all, it's curated to show you people you agree with. That's not good in some ways, because you hear an echo chamber if you're not careful. You end up sometimes living in an echo chamber, and we don't need that. But back in the days when, say, the 80s and 90s and so on, back in those days, we didn't have something curating things for us to show us people we agreed with. Whoever lived on your street, your neighbors and so on. You can't just block your weird, strange neighbors over there, because you guys probably will want to borrow each other's ladders or borrow something from each other, and you wanted the neighborhood to be smoothly run. People got along for the most part. Again, I guess we learned to coexist with people, like I said before, even if we didn't like them. You would have barbecues and you would have block parties and all that. You can't just unfollow all these people. They live there. They're right there. But back then, unlike today, more people in the neighborhoods interacted. Like I said, there would be parties and so on where everyone would come together. Learning to coexist with people, to tolerate them even if you don't like them, to listen to some of their wild, crazy rants, I think personally that maybe, just maybe, that made us more tolerant of different kinds of people, or at least we were better at pretending. What's, another take on that? Well, nostalgia versus reality. Were people really nicer? Now, that's the thing. Were people really nicer, or do we just remember it that way because we were growing up and it was a specific time in our life and so on? When we look at old pictures and we're like, wow. But we got to remember some of the other stuff. People talked to each other a lot more, but one thing I remember is they didn't sometimes mostly ever have a filter. Your neighbor, or in my case, my step-great-grandmother, would say things like, well, look at you, you've gotten so fat. Oh my goodness. And you would have your mom's friends or some of your other relatives that would say, oh, what are you going to do about that, whatever it was. You have bad skin, you need some help with that. It literally, no filter. I remember there was my step-great-grandmother. She had said one time, she's talking about another kid, and she said, Mary, said, you're not slender like so-and-so. You're fat. See, literally straight up, they would tell you whatever they thought. And if you're a kid especially, you had to take it. There's no block button, but also you're not supposed to be rude to the elders. You can grit your teeth and smile. Maybe we were kinder and maybe we were nicer. Maybe we won't go that far. Maybe we could just say we had thicker skin. Now, today, another thing about today is we have kind of a trade-off, I believe. When you have more distance from people, you have less drama, generally speaking. Today's technology lets us avoid a lot of unnecessary drama. You don't have to deal with the annoying coworkers. You don't have to deal with the guy that you went on a date with and you don't want to see him again. You don't have to interact with people on all these spontaneous things. But you know what you miss, though? There's a trade-off here. There were always these weird, funny moments, and some of them are your strongest memories, that made life feel more real. And like I said, got stuck in our brains. Maybe there was this random friend that I had one time and her grandparents had an RV, and I had never been in an RV, and I'd always wanted to see what it was like to camp out and that type of thing. And they invited me in. They were making steaks. It was like the greatest steak ever. And that wouldn't be something probably that a lot of people would randomly encounter, because I was going to pick up my friend, and she said, well, my grandparents are out here camping at so-and-so place, come over. And then so I went and picked her up there. Grandparents were lovely and great, absolutely great conversations. Now, you also could, in this whole trade-off, one thing that I don't like is I don't like the fact that we have lost a lot of that spontaneity and the funny moments and all that, because when there's a screen between the two of you, it's not like you can get stuck in a car with someone's weird older brother who is out there determined to take you to some haunted graveyard at midnight, and you're terrified, but then again, it becomes another one of your great memories. You had maybe one of those experiences that you just look back on and say, wow, that was so fun. But today, a lot of times, people will be texting on the phone. They're staring at screens so much, like I'm staring at the screen here of the camera when I'm trying to make this video. But we're connecting, but are we really connecting? And are we really connecting in a way that the trade-off can be also that when you have enough, we'll say, keyboard warriors can ruin it for everyone. Because if you're on YouTube, if you're on any kind of social media at all, there's always someone who has to be that person who makes terrible remarks, right? There's the trolls, there's the people that just like to argue and so on. They become keyboard warriors because they don't have to deal with it face to face. They don't see you. They're not there looking you in the eye. Some of those encounters that you were kind of forced into, truthfully, by circumstances, you actually realize in retrospect, dang, that was cool. That was really different. That was something that I remember. The conclusion here, I don't know. Do we look back with those rose-colored glasses through the eyes of nostalgia and remember all of that wonderful stuff that we have in our brains, and forget a lot of the other inconveniences? Did we like people more back then? Were we nicer because we liked people more? I don't know. I think we tolerated different people and different quirks that they had and so on. I think if somebody was a jerk to us, we didn't like them. If they were cool, then we were cool with them. I mean, that was my experience anyway. In conclusion, do we think that people were nicer back then? Did we like people more? I don't know. I think what I've come to the conclusion of is that we tolerated people more because we had to. And sometimes, often actually, in that tolerance, we discovered these unexpected friendships, or at least some kind of an understanding that we're all here together trying to make it work. And I remember so many friends that I've had throughout the years, it's literally just proximity and just something that would never have happened if it were simply an online conversation. Just that getting out, going in the car, driving to the putt-putt golf or something, whatever, when we were a little older, and driving and stuff, or riding the bikes beside the railroad tracks with my nephew, who's about 4 years younger than me, and just going out and having these experiences. But we had to be out amongst the people. I think that today, since we have more of a choice with who we interact with, that's one thing. But I think we've lost a lot of the social endurance we had. See, back the way I remember it, most of us felt like, well, if you're a jerk, we don't like you. You're a jerk. But if you're cool, then we're cool with you. And I think there's a place in between. We've got less social endurance today, the ability to handle people even when they're annoying, because that was just part of our lives back then. We've got that going by the wayside as you're able to curate things and as you're able to block people and ghost people and all of that other stuff. But maybe the best part of it could be, we could say, somewhere in the middle. Engage with people more in real life if you can. I know my son used to get kind of aggravated when I would want to go to the actual cashier at a grocery store. And he's like, why don't we just do the self-checkout or whatever, or the kiosk if we were going to go inside like a fast food place or something. And I'm like, because maybe I want to talk to a human. Maybe I want to talk to a human, because I like that. I do like that human interaction. Even though I'm an introvert, I am a diehard introvert, and I am also shy at the same time. Engage with people more, but figuratively and maybe literally on social media. Keep the block button handy just in case. You never know when you're going to run into one of those jerks on here. Were people actually nicer back then? Did we not have a choice? Did we have thicker skin? Were we afraid that if we said things that people say sometimes online to each other that we would get punched in the face or whatever? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button if you have not, and subscribe for some more Gen X perspectives, because someone's got to explain the old days to the young folks, because somebody's got to reminisce with you about those days. I love you guys. You guys are awesome. Mwah. See you next time.